Welcome back. I'm Vincent Perryman and you're watching Legalese. Joining us on our show is Gus Wilson, local CPA. We were discussing business entities. Gus, before the break we were talking about sole proprietorships, and we covered sort of the tax aspects of those. Now, as far as risk, what's sitting out there if I'm operating business as a sole proprietor?
Right. We talked about many of the benefits of the sole proprietorship and how it's agile like a sports car, to continue your analogy, but there are risks involved with having a sole proprietorship. Essentially, there's no distinction between you and the business. You share victory, you share defeat, you share liability. Therefore, if you are not comfortable with that aspect, you might want to think about another entity, or you can mitigate that risk, as I said earlier, by getting insurance. Mm-hmm. For professionals, you would need malpractice of some sort. If you're a real estate type guy, you would need some kind of commercial property insurance, as well as life, health, and the other standard insurances. And you need to understand the risk of getting those insurances as well. You could sign a policy that wouldn't cover enough, and if you did get sued, it could be an unfortunate event that you could be put out of business, and also they could come after your personal assets as well. Bad news, all things considered, but there are, like I said, certain benefits that outweigh that, and you can mitigate some of that risk with the use of insurance.
Okay, so if somebody's not comfortable with that amount of risk, then what are the other entity options?
The next option would be sort of like a partnership. And a partnership is essentially very similar to a sole proprietorship, except for that there is some limited liability available. A partnership is just a group of people who are pursuing the same goal, essentially. Everyone's on the same page. You form the structure based on the partnership agreement, and everything goes back to the partnership agreement. So I can't say this enough, but when you are forming a partnership, make sure you read every single line on that partnership agreement. Make sure you understand what the loss allocations, the capital allocations, the risk involved, how to wind up the business, how to start the business, how to transfer assets. Any single aspect of the business has to be controlled by the partnership agreement. They're very difficult to draft. Not so difficult that they're cost prohibitive, though. They're still a very flexible form of business entity. And another advantage of them is, once again, there's no taxation at the business level. It all flows through to the partner, so you will pay taxes on the business earnings at your base tax rate. And I say business earnings, there is a lot of confusion with partnerships. People get confused between the difference between business earnings, which are your profits from the business, and draws, which is the money that they actually receive from the business. And those are two completely different things. You can draw out as much money as you want out of the business within reason, but what you're paying taxes on are what the business actually earns or loses during the year.
Okay. Well, and the other thing with partnerships is you're going to have to file a separate return from your own return, which is just an informational return.
That is correct, and it would, there's some trickiness to it as well, and there's also some rules and regulations that you need to make sure that you're aware of. So once again, I would urge you to discuss it or have someone prepare it for you, and make sure that you understand what goes into that return.
Okay. So if you wanted something that was going to have less risk for your personal assets and all, what are the other entities there?
Just to continue on down the road here, we've talked about the smaller, more agile type ones, and something that's a little bit bigger and offers you more protection. And then you go with something that's more just ironclad, and that would be like a C-Corp. And a C-Corp has many, many benefits, but also many, many risk involved with it as well. And this would be risk from a taxation standpoint instead of a liability standpoint. The biggest advantage of a C-Corp is that it is ironclad. They essentially, for business risk, if you do get sued, they can only come after the amount of money that you pitched up into the C-Corp, which is your stock investment. The business entity is its own standalone member. There's no, you're not tied into the business at all. And that could be offset, a lot of times if you get a loan or something like that, they do ask for personal guarantees, but outside of anything special that you've signed, the business is the business and you are you.
Right, and another thing from my perspective to add to that, because this is something that other attorneys don't necessarily like when they see me coming after a corporation, I'm working on piercing the corporate veil, which in essence, I'm going into court, I'm making an argument that says, you did not run this like a corporation, you ran this as if it was your own wallet. Therefore, we should be allowed to sue you and get into your own wallet. So that's something there where I think listening to your advisors and making sure that you follow all of the corporate protocols with that is very important. Now, the other question that I always get with C-Corps is why is it called a C-Corp? And that's just because it's subchapter C of the Internal Revenue Code. So the other type of corporation is an S-Corp from the subchapter S of the Internal Revenue Code. So what is the difference there?
Really, the difference is I would consider the subchapter S to be more of a hybrid. The entity exists as a C-Corp, but you pay taxes at a partnership type level. The earnings are essentially flow through. And there's certain requirements, like you can't have more than 75 shareholders, and you do have to take the election to qualify. But it is a very effective vehicle for people who want the benefits of the C-Corp, but also the benefits of how the flow-through tax rates go through. And the reason that you would really urge a C-Corp to consider an S-Corp election, especially if it's a closely held family-type entity, is that corporate tax returns are very, very high, and I don't see any relief in sight for them. It's a kind of a tiered thing, but I have my notes here. Essentially, if you make profits between $330,000 and $10 million, you're paying 35% corporate tax rates. And that's another huge disadvantage to the corporation, is that you will fall subject to the double taxation. I'm sure everyone knows what that, they've heard it before, but they might not understand what that means. But essentially, the corporation makes profits, the government taxes them 35%. And then the corporation distributes to the owners dividends, which are then taxed at the dividend rate for individuals. So in essence, you've taken that same profit and pay tax on it twice. And so to avoid that, an S-Corp is a great vehicle to be able to avoid the double taxation, essentially.
Okay. Yeah, and the one other thing about the S-Corp is I guess there are some limitations when you go to sell the business as far as who can actually own shares in an S-Corp. I know there's certain trusts that can, and there's also other S-Corps. But you can't have a C-Corp as a shareholder. Otherwise, it destroys the election on that. But when we return from our break, we'll talk more with Gus Wilson about business entities. Please stay with us.